That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, we're going to go through and we are going to be looking at some of these sell high wide receivers. Now, last week we crushed it. I mean, we had guys like DK Metcalf, Hollywood Brown. So yeah, we're going to continue to do the same thing every single week. Just make sure you go down there, subscribe to the channel. Most importantly, hit the bell next to the subscribe button because we've also live streamed every single day for over 100 days in a row, just answering all of your questions. So of course, if you want to come out to those live streams, not only subscribe, but hit the bell so you know when we go live. Drop that like, leave a comment. Every time you leave a like and a comment, you actually get entered in to win a Fantasy Flock Network hat. Let's choose some winners right now. We got the Honey Raptor coming out. It says, I got that 6-0 feeling. Let's go, my friend. Happy to hear that you're 6-0. Now I think we just shape up for the fantasy football playoffs. Steven says, a nice video. Thank you. You've convinced me to keep Mike Williams, a flock hat. Mason, yes, sir, I got you. Just make sure y'all go through and send me an email ASAP with your physical address. That way I can get that hat out to you. Look at the description of the video. And down there in the description, you can also find a link to join the flock on Patreon if you are wanting to have access to our rest of season rankings updated every single week. If you want to support the channel, you want to join the flock, you want to join our group chat, yada, yada, yada. There are a million things over there on Patreon. You can check down in the description of the video. And that should be it. Let's go through. Let's dive into what we have for these sell high wide receivers. And we're going to start it off with some players that you're not going to get a lot of value for. I mean, these are going to be lower tier players, and then we're just going to continuously move up until we're talking about some studs near the end of the video. And let's start it with someone that you just picked up off the waiver wire. And I know you're not going to be getting a lot in return, but my point is I would take anything in return, and that's going to be Donovan Peoples-Jones. Okay, so I know you're rolling your eyes. Trust me, I get it. You're not going to be able to go trade Donovan Peoples-Jones for Calvin Ridley. Of course, that's not going to be the case. So we have to then ask ourselves, what kind of deal are we going to be looking to get in return for Donovan Peoples-Jones? We'll talk about that one second. But first, let's look into exactly why I think he's a player that we just need to be picking up from the waiver wire. Probably that's where you got him this past week. I mean, if you're in a deeper dynasty format, then you already had him on your roster, but then you can go through and look to sell now. And with Donovan Peoples-Jones, yes, this is a second-year player coming out of Michigan. I mean, if you didn't know, he was actually the #1 high school recruit out of that 2017 class. Goes to Michigan, some horrendous quarterback play. I mean, really was never able to get anything going. Was a fantastic athlete. Clearly has the size 6'2", 208 pounds. And yeah, this past week, he drops 26 fantasy points. He was the wide receiver 5 in fantasy this past week, but this is not going to be predictive going forward at all. Like if you ask me, Mason, I know we got a lot of teams on bye. I mean, maybe I'm a little desperate for a flex. Maybe I'm desperate for a wide receiver 2 spot. Can I play Donovan Peoples-Jones? I'm going, nope. You cannot play him this week. You can't go through. You can't play him next week. I mean, this is a wide receiver coming off of a performance where, yes, he had 26 fantasy points. He had 5 targets. With those 5 targets, yes, he was incredible. He had over 100 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns, but really just a random spike week that you were getting. And like I said, you're not going to get a lot in return if you do go through and trade him, but what you could try to get is actually just a slight upgrade in your starting lineup. And my point with Donovan Peoples-Jones is this is a wide receiver that I have no interest in even starting over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And if you're not going to be able to start him then, and we know Jarvis Landry also coming back, that's going to be taking away additional targets from Donovan Peoples-Jones, there's really no reason to even have him on your roster. Like, I think I would almost rather have the roster spot so we can go through, we can try to chase some upside at the running back position so we can try to find the next Darrell Henderson. We can try to find the next Darrell Williams. We can try to find the next Devontae Booker. If that's going to be the case, why don't we just go and try to package up from Donovan Peoples-Jones with another wide receiver on our bench? Maybe we look at Sterling Shepard and Donovan Peoples-Jones, go, okay, well, what if I can get to a wide receiver that I like just slightly more that we could have for those bye weeks? I mean, maybe if we can trade Sterling Shepard and Donovan Peoples-Jones in a package, and instead we can get to someone that you may like a little bit more, like Jalen Waddle, I think that would make a lot of sense. Obviously, you're not getting a lot in return, but selling him for anything, I think that would be our play, just so we can get that roster spot. We can use it on a backup running back. Now, our next sell high candidate will actually be a pair of teammates here. Let's go with Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick. Now, with Sutton and Patrick, keep in mind, Cortland Sutton, we have been calling a must-start wide receiver. This has been someone that you're very excited about the role that he has in Denver whenever you do not have Jerry Jeudy in this offense. I mean, as soon as Jerry Jeudy had the high ankle sprain, we were all over Cortland Sutton as someone we were wanting to go out. We were wanting to aggressively target and put into our starting lineup every chance that we had. And yeah, he's been fantastic over the past 2 weeks. I mean, Cortland Sutton here, this is a wide receiver that's gone back-to-back performances over 20 fantasy points. Not only is the production there, but also the volume is as well. And, that's what we love to see. I mean, if you're looking so far this season, Cortland Sutton has actually averaged close to 9 targets a game. Now, over the past 3 weeks in particular, this has been someone averaging over 10 targets a game. I mean, the production has been fantastic. The volume has been fantastic to go along with it. This past week, 8 receptions, 94 receiving yards, a receiving touchdown. The week before that, 7 receptions, 120 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown at the same time. Now, I will say going forward, the issue is Jerry Jeudy coming back to this offense, because I know it was a very small sample. Trust me, I'm not basing everything off this 1 week sample that we had back in week 1. But in that 1 week where Jerry Jeudy did play in this offense, Cortland Sutton, I mean, he had 3 targets, 1 reception, 14 receiving yards, nothing you can get that excited about. And you're looking at Jerry Jeudy who's already been designated to return from the IR, and you're saying, well, the reason we didn't really like Cortland Sutton coming into the season is based on the idea that Jerry Jeudy looks like he is going to be the wide receiver that comes in, and he is going to be that wide receiver 1 for the Denver Broncos. Now, I'm going to say that it's not like you're going to have Jerry Jeudy, then a tier down, you're going to have Cortland Sutton. No, it'll be a wide receiver 1A, wide receiver 1B type situation. But still, if we're going back to what we actually had from Jerry Jeudy, now keep in mind, it's a 1 week sample, so it's hard to read too much into this. But Jerry Jeudy back in week 1 in this offense, he only played about a half of football. So keep that in mind, a very small sample. But in that week, you actually saw Jerry Jeudy come out, and he had a ridiculous amount of volume where he did get 7 targets in only a half of football, 6 receptions, 72 receiving yards. So I just think that Jerry Jeudy is going to come in. He's going to see about 20% of his team's target share. Maybe it's down there at 18%. But regardless, it's going to be taking more volume than you would have had going to Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick, another wide receiver that is one of the clearest sell high candidates you're ever going to see. I mean, he's played pretty much the entire season at this point with no Jerry Jeudy in this offense, including over the past few weeks with no KJ Hamler. And right now he's a high-end wide receiver 4. I mean, this is someone that once Jerry Jeudy comes back, you will never, and I repeat, ever consider playing Tim Patrick. And if you were in a best ball format, then sure, you could see Tim Patrick having some impressive weeks, just randomly having a spike week here or there. But to predict when that's actually going to come, it's going to be nearly impossible. So yeah, those Denver wide receivers, I think we're just going to be selling them before you actually get Jerry Jeudy back in, because Jerry Jeudy will be the focal point of this Denver Broncos offense. Now, our next wide receiver, someone that's actually made a couple of our sell high lists, but I think we need to go right back to him, AJ Green. So AJ Green this past week was fantastic. I mean, AJ Green comes out, he gets the receiving touchdown you're looking for when you start AJ Green. And I know that it seems like he's been pretty damn good so far this season. I mean, this is a wide receiver that's had 3 receiving touchdowns, so he's averaging half a touchdown a game. He's had 32 receptions, 340 receiving yards. He's very consistent with the volume that he sees. Literally 5 out of 6 weeks this season, he has had exactly 6 targets, which is kind of laughable. He actually played the most amount of snaps in this Arizona Cardinals passing offense this past week. But one thing I really want to look at here is the fact that you actually have Rondale Moore seeing a career high in snaps coming into this offense. I think that this will be a wide receiver that continues to expand his role. I mean, clearly this is a player with the athleticism. I mean, you just kind of need him to develop at the NFL level. I think that's right now happening for Rondale Moore. So personally, I'm going to be looking at someone like AJ Green, saying that he is most likely going to go from being the second receiving option in this offense to possibly the third. And to go along with this with AJ Green, I mean, if we're talking about other players entering into this offense, you're going to have Zach Ertz coming in at the same time. Now, I'm not saying that Zach Ertz is some great tight end. We're actually going to get to him at the end of the video, but still, here with Zach Ertz, we know that this will dilute the target share for really all of these wide receivers yet again, because right now they really haven't had any impact player playing at the tight end position. Or I'd imagine that Zach Ertz will see the most of volume out of any tight end in Arizona so far. So yeah, AJ Green, I think the ceiling's capped. I think that he's been mainly living off of his touchdown rate that he's had, which you would naturally assume in an offense that has Kyler Murray, that the touchdown rate for pretty much any of these wide receivers would be higher than league average. But still, it's not going to continue to happen at this rate. I would be looking to sell. Now, our next wide receiver. I mean, y'all know this is also someone that we've listed as a sell high option before. And it's so funny because, like, we'll list AJ Green as a sell high option. You can go through, you can package him up, get a top 24 wide receiver with another player on your bench. This same guy. I mean, it's the same type situation, but a lot of people want to act like we're getting this wrong. However, right now, he's a wide receiver 5 on the season. Darnell Mooney. I mean, right now, the wide receiver 53 in points per game, coming off a week where he had 8 targets, 5 receptions, 45 receiving yards. He pretty much had every single target in this offense that did not go to Allen Robinson. I mean, you're looking at the wide receivers here. You had 8 targets to Mooney, 8 targets to Allen Robinson, only 1 to Marquise Goodwin, and 1 to Damiere Byrd. So they're getting everything. But the problem is the pie is just so damn small in Chicago, where you're looking at Justin Fields. It is laughable. It is unbelievable. This past week, it was a little bit better with the amount of volume that you had in Chicago against the Green Bay Packers. Keep in mind, I mean, with no Jair Alexander, that Green Bay Packers defense is 100% one that you can throw against. But still, Justin Fields at this point of the season, I mean, we're not going to be taking into every single game, considering the fact that, yes, you had Andy Dalton starting week 1. You had Andy Dalton playing a considerable amount of snaps in week 2. But if you're looking at from when Justin Fields took over as the starting quarterback for Chicago in week 3, this is someone that has averaged about 11 completions a game. You cannot start any wide receiver from an offense that the quarterback is completing about 11 passes per game. I mean, the volume is laughably low. This is not going to get any better anytime soon. I think we're just going to go through. We're going to look to sell because, I mean, what's the real upside play here? Even if something were to occur to Allen Robinson, like say Allen Robinson does get injured and A-Rob is out for the season, are you then plugging and playing Darnell Mooney without question? I mean, maybe you make the argument that he turns into Brandon Cooks in this offense. Still, I don't know if we can assume that's going to happen because with a player like Darnell Mooney here, this is also a wide receiver that you're looking at saying, well, we know that he's more of a field stretching option. He's never going to be the player that's the target hog. So you're going to see these random spike weeks. I mean, I think in a best ball format, sure, Darnell Mooney's fine, knowing that you never have to predict when he is actually going to pop off. But in a league where you're submitting your starting lineup each and every week, I see no upside for him to turn into a weekly starter for you. So I think we're just going to sell. I know that during the bye weeks, we're going to get a little desperate here. Maybe you can find an owner that right now has a couple of his key wide receivers on bye. Maybe he has Amari, CeeDee Lamb, Mike Williams. I mean, just a handful of guys on bye. And you can look to possibly sell Darnell Mooney and then another wide receiver to get up to someone like CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, or Mike Williams. Now, our next wide receiver will be someone that I know we're going to get a lot of hate for. And the thing is, I'm updating my rest of season rankings on Patreon right now as we speak. Like after I get done with this video, that's what I'm going to continue to work on. And whenever I'm looking at his rest of season ranking, it is so hard to put him as high as I know y'all are going to have him. This is Antonio Brown. So with Antonio Brown, yes, he crushed on Thursday night. This is why we're saying that he's an intriguing sell high, because you are going to be able to get so much value for Antonio Brown, as you should be able to. He is the wide receiver 1, at least right now. He looks like he is the wide receiver 1 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He is the wide receiver 6 on a points per game basis so far this season. So he's a mid wide receiver 1. And trust me, I have Antonio Brown in a considerable amount of my leagues. I'll be honest, I haven't traded for him at all this season. Everywhere I have him, I drafted him coming into the year, knowing that he was at a much cheaper cost. And if you're looking at Antonio Brown, he has been fantastic. I mean, this past week, 13 targets, 9 receptions, 93 receiving yards. The week before that, 7 receptions, 124 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. The volume's been there. The elite efficiency has been there. I will say, I think the touchdown rate's going to come down. I think it's really hard to continue to project Antonio Brown to just take this much production from the combination of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, knowing what we know historically about those two wide receivers. So I think if we're going to be looking at Antonio Brown, potential trades that we could be trying to make, right now, I am going to have both of the Dallas Cowboys wide receivers ranked ahead of him. Maybe at this point, it's hard to have Amari Cooper in that range, but still, I think you could at least make the argument that with those two options, they're going to be in offenses that are definitely looking to throw the ball very often, offenses that are some of the most productive offenses in the entire NFL. And they just don't have to deal with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski. Other wide receivers I would have ahead of him. I would 100% trade him for Mike Williams with the Mike Williams down week. I'll trade him for DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley. I mean, Terry McLaurin as well could be an intriguing buy low candidate right now after disappointing against the Kansas City Chiefs. I think there are a lot of those stud wide receivers where you don't have to deal with this same level of target competition that you would have with Antonio Brown, that you could just make a solid pivot over to. And I think it's just a spot where he's great, but can we really be that confident with someone playing in an offense with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Rob Gronkowski coming back? Now, our next player is not going to be at the wide receiver position. We're going to go over to tight end a little bit just because I feel like we have to include him on this list. We're going to go over to Dalton Schultz. Now, speaking of Dallas, obviously, they are on bye this week, and Dalton Schultz has been a tight end that, I mean, so far this season, if you took Dalton Schultz in the last round of a best ball league, I mean, you must be crushing. Nobody else is getting this level of production. He's been the tight end 4 on a points per game basis. Keep in mind, I play in tight end premium formats, but still, this is someone that's had 37 targets through 6 weeks. That is incredible, averaging about 6 targets a game at the tight end position in an offense that we know is going to be very efficient overall. He's averaging almost 10 yards per target. And if you're looking at it, I mean, he's had 3 receiving touchdowns, but with just the tight end position in nature, as well as the volume he's had, I think that's a completely fair rate to assume that he's going to continue to have that through the rest of the year. Now, with all this being said, one thing that I really want to be looking at with Dalton Schultz is the fact that you are going to be getting Michael Gallup coming back to this offense sometime soon. Now, with Michael Gallup, this is a wide receiver that obviously plays a completely different position. But I do think based on what we have seen with Michael Gallup historically, I mean, going back to 2019, this is the perfect example I can give. And please don't say that, oh, Mason, you're an Amari Cooper hater. I love Amari Cooper. I mean, we used to have a Raiders jersey of Amari Cooper behind us in the studio. But this is more so to illustrate exactly how talented you have a wide receiver like Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup back in 2019 averaged more targets and more receiving yards per game than Amari Cooper. Michael Gallup back in 2019, his second season in the NFL, averaged more targets and more receiving yards than Amari Cooper. This is someone that's extremely talented. He is a much better option than Cedric Wilson. He will be taking those Cedric Wilson snaps. He will be taking those Cedric Wilson targets, and he'll be adding on to that given the talent that he is. So maybe you see this go from the direction of Dalton Schultz. Maybe you actually get it going towards what you're going to be getting with Michael Gallup. So I think with Schultz, while yes, he has been in a fantastic offense, he's been really great so far this season. If you picked him up off the waiver wire to start the year, that's fantastic. But if we can go through and sell him for a tight end that we like in the long term, if we could go get TJ Hawkinson instead, if we could go through, try to package another player with him to try to go up and get Kyle Pitts, try to get Mark Andrews, even trade him straight up right now for an injured George Kittle, I think any of those moves would be fantastic. So now our last player we're going to include on this list, I have to bring him up. We've had so many questions about him in the live streams. We're going to go Zach Ertz. Now with Zach Ertz, I know a lot of people want to get excited with the trade that you have. Of course, with Zach Ertz going from an offense in Philadelphia that you're not that excited about with Jalen Hurts, where Jalen Hurts is going to be a great fantasy option in his own right. That's mainly based on the fact that Jalen Hurts is going to be a fantastic rushing quarterback, but he's not going to have a ton of passing volume, to where now he's going over to the Arizona Cardinals, going over to one of, if not the best offenses in the entire NFL. I know there are reasons to be excited, but at the same time, you just have to look at a couple different factors here. A, he's a tight end that is switching teams halfway through the year. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard to just learn a completely new game plan right away and get implemented into that offense with Cliff Kingsbury, knowing exactly how they want to use him. B, with Zach Ertz, he is going from an offense that had a rookie Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, and that is it to get targets to. Whereas now he's going to competing for targets with the combination of DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore. I know that they don't play the same position, but Zach Ertz isn't a prototypical tight end. Zach Ertz is more of a move tight end that I don't want to say operates as a receiver, but Zach Ertz ain't standing in line, and he's not giving you elite run blocking. So I think that at this point, you probably just look at the added target competition and add on the fact that as Zach Ertz is going to an offense that he's never played in before, knowing that he's going to start a little slow, I would imagine that most people starting Zach Ertz in their lineup over the next 2 to 3 weeks are going to be disappointed. Now, maybe you want to be trying to sell high on Zach Ertz now and then hope that he disappoints over the next 2 to 3 weeks, gets cut from that roster. Then you can pick him up for the end of the year where he will be a little more comfortable in the offense. But as of now, I think this will be a situation where we're just going to go through. We're going to try to sell him high. Now, thank you. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please go down there, make sure you drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Of course, we will have those rest of season rankings updated on Patreon and our dynasty rankings on Patreon as well this week. So make sure you go check those out. And yeah, that's all I got for y'all. Hope you have a great day, and I hope I see y'all in the live stream tonight.